Howdy folks, welcome to World of Tanks patch 8.8 test server with the mighty Jingles. Whole bunch of changes coming in patch 8.8, not just the introduction of a new Soviet medium tank line. There's all sorts of things that are changing to all different kinds of vehicles. The Super Pershing is back, there's a new map, some old maps have been reworked and put back into the game. There are changes to the way the guns of a lot of the Russian medium tanks work. There's a new German Tier 4 and 5 and 6 heavy tank, sort of. The interface has changed in certain areas. There's all sorts of things that have changed in patch 8.8. So before we get started, we're going to pop over to the World of Tanks website and actually have a look at the patch notes, because there are some very, very, very welcome changes there that are not going to be immediately apparent to everybody just by logging into the test server and looking at all the obvious stuff. So let's go and see what we can see. So first things first, and I don't want to dwell too much on the new content because I'm going to be showing you more of that actually in the game itself. But as is the main news, the new Soviet medium tanks. There's one at tier 6, 7, 8, nothing at tier 9, new one at tier 10. The bridge between tier 8 and 9 is occupied by the existing T-54. So there's those new Soviet medium tanks, which I'll show you shortly. Two new German tanks, a tier 4 heavy tank, the Durchbruchswagen 2, I think I pronounced that right. I'm sure there are plenty of German subscribers who will tell me otherwise if I didn't. So that's a new tier 4 German heavy tank, and there's a new German tier 6 medium tank, the 3002M. That thing I am very excited about, and I'll show you why in the game. Changes to German tanks, we have the 3001H, this is hilarious, has been moved from tier 6 to tier 5 and is now a heavy tank. The 3001H was probably the most mobile, in fact no question about it. It was the fastest, zippiest, lightest, most thinly armoured German tier 6 medium tank, and that's the one they decided to make a heavy tank. Well, it's not actually quite as ridiculous as it sounds, as we'll see when I look at it on the test server. Also, the 3601H has been changed from a medium to heavy. Yeah, that's been on the cards for years now. It's finally happened. There's a sort of good news, bad news situation about the two new Chinese premiums, the tier 8 medium and the tier 8 heavy. They've been added to the gift shop, but there's no gift shop on the test server. They're not in the tech tree. I cannot show you the two new Chinese premiums. That's really disappointing. I was looking forward to trying those. People are asking, well, why is there a new tier 8 Chinese premium medium? We've already got the Type 59. Yeah, but you can't buy the Type 59. So there you go. Still no premium tier 8 American tank destroyer, however. Just dropping hints here. You never know where they're going to take root. Next, new map, Tundra. It's a Soviet rocky woodland type map, an autumn map. So yeah, we'll have a look at that. 3 maps reworked, only one of which most of you have probably heard of. Serene Coast, which was crap. Looked pretty as hell, but was just 2 choke points and a massive camp fest. Speaking of massive camp fests, Swamp and Kamarin. Kamarin, if you asked me to give you my top 3 list of worst tanks of the worst maps in any game ever, Kamarin would have been first, second and third. It was just a horrible, horrible camp fest. The fastest way to win Kamarin was for the entire team just to rush one flag. And then congratulations, game's over in the first 2 minutes. You just got 300 XP doubled for your first win of the day. If that didn't happen, everybody just camped hard, and it usually ended in a horrible 15-minute long draw. It was a horrible map. I will be very interested to see how Wargaming have gone about making that thing even vaguely playable. Swamp was removed in, I think, patch 7.3 or 7.4. I didn't mind Swamp, but a lot of people hated it. Again, we'll see how they've changed that. And they've added an encounter mode to the Mountain Pass map. So that's the actual new stuff that's coming in 8.8, but there's a lot more than that. Now on to the minor fixes and changes, and some of these minor fixes and changes are anything but minor. For example, the Super Pershing is back in the game. It's back in the in-game store. You can buy it once more. They've added the possibility for you to sell it back for gold if you don't like the way they've changed it. What they have actually done, and this is kind of disappointing, they've changed the front armour and some other parameters. Could you be any less specific? I almost know what you're talking about. But we'll take a look at the Super Pershing and try to figure out exactly how it's changed. Give you some sort of guidance on whether or not you should keep it, sell it, or buy it in the first place. Again, speaking of misleading, for Chinese tanks, the penetration of the APCR shell, it's high explosive anti-tank shell, on the PO471 122mm gun, it's the PO471 120mm high explosive anti-tank shell, has been changed from 300mm to 250mm. What that is here in the Tankopedia, tanks like the IS-2, it's this gun, not the PO471. It's that thing there, that 122mm 37122 JT, which had 300mm of penetration with its high explosive anti-tank, not APCR shell. That's gone down to 250, and that was, in my opinion, certain IS-2 drivers might disagree, because look at that, from 106, it's almost double the penetration. That's ridiculous. 250 is good enough. 300 was just absurd. You could derp away at the front of tier 10 heavies and your tier 7 heavy and just blast your way through their gun mantlets. It was a ridiculous amount of penetration. So that's been changed. It's not just the IS-2. Which other tanks have the same? The 110 has the same gun. There it is. Does the 111 also have that gun? I don't know. It doesn't. So it's basically affecting two tanks, the IS-2 and the 110. This is actually a major change. They've changed the engines and characteristics of a whole bunch of German vehicles. And I don't want to get into too much detail now, just sitting here looking at the patch notes. We'll actually look at the changes that they've done to those on those tanks in the garage on the test server. Another change, quite significant, they've increased the damage but decreased the rate of fire for the following Soviet 100mm guns. And what we're looking at here is T-43, T-44 and T-54, as well as some of the second line of Soviet tank destroyers that use those medium tank guns. So more damage, less rate of fire. Yeah, fine. Can't really argue with that. Expanded the functionality of missions. Basically, there's a new mission interface, so you can actually see, instead of just playing the game and thinking mission complete, have an extra day's premium. You're like, where did that come from? Now you can actually see what missions you're currently doing, your progress, and have a look at what the next mission in line is, and so on and so on. And it's just welcome interface changes. Some protection there against accidentally selling tanks. We'll show you that. Completely reworked the statistics and achievement page. It's a little flaky on the test server. It's actually crashed my game once when viewing these statistics and achievements. But when it's all nice and stable and they make this thing go live, I'm sure it's definitely better than the current screen. Voiceovers for each nation's crews. They now speak in their own language, should you activate that setting. What else? Oh, here we go. This is fantastic. If this was the only thing that happened in patch 8.8, I would have called this a good patch. When your team is defeated, but you get one of the Battle Hero, Epic or Platoon achievements, you will now receive 1.5 times the credits and experience, exactly as if you were on the victorious team. Now, if that was your first game of the day in whichever tank that was, you're still not going to get double experience, because regardless of how well you did, your team still lost. You still lost the game. So it's not quite the same when we're talking about the double XP for the first victory of the day. But I'm not complaining about that. That's just fantastic. You're not going to see any more 1000 XP defeats because you were awesome but your team sucked. All right, if you get Sniper, Steel Wall, Top Gun, Confederate, Invader, all that good stuff, if you get any of those medals, even though your team loses, your XP and credits are calculated as if you were on the winning team. So that's a fantastic change. Oh, this is great as well. Light tank drivers, watch what you're doing. They've changed the rules for determining who caused a ram. It now defaults to the player whose tank had the highest speed, not who did the most damage. So light tank drivers who think it's funny to drive up the arses of heavy tanks and big tank destroyers, carry on doing it. You're the one who's going to pay for it. That's another great change. Other than that, everything else is pretty much just a whole bunch of minor UI fixes, game enhancements and so on, none of which are really worth spending a great deal of time talking about. So, back to the garage. Right then, here we are, back on the test server. First thing we're going to do is take a look at the new line of Russian medium tanks, starting here at tier 6 with the A43, direct competitor to the T-34-85, very capable tier 6 medium tank, good 85mm gun, decent armour protection, nicely sloped all-round armour, very mobile, very manoeuvrable, great little tier 6 tank. A43 is, well, it's got a better power to weight ratio than the T-34-85, so it's more mobile. The armour protection is slightly better. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a very good selection of guns. There's no 85mm, it's got an awful stock 76mm, it's got an average upgraded 76mm, and it's got the always reliable 57mm ZIS-4. Unfortunately, the 57mm ZIS-4 is, well, it's a great gun on a tier 5 tank, but it's not very special on a tier 6. But, you know, it gets the job done. But I can't see anybody getting excited about the A43. There's just, yeah, nothing great about it. But anyway, moving on. Tier 7, things start getting interesting. This thing, the A44, that's it in the stock configuration. But we'll put an upgraded turret on it, which has some extra armour bolted on. You can see the armour riveted onto the sides there, or spot welded onto the sides if you like. And we'll have a look at the upgraded, ooh, a 107mm gun. That's the same gun that you get on the T150. That's interesting. What else is interesting is just look at this thing from the front. I mean, it's bizarre looking. As a medium tank, it looks more like one of the Russian tank destroyers. But look at that from the front. And this is 150mm thick and sloped back at 60 degrees. So it's effective a lot. Yeah. You're going to be trolling people for like crazy from the front with this thing. Now, your turret armour ain't that great. Even the upgraded turret is only 90mm, and you do have this with the upgraded turret. It's like you're trying to be a British tank destroyer. A very inviting bulge at the top there. There's tumour at the top for people to shoot at, but it's not that much of a target. And if you can stay at medium to long range with this thing, and basically I think play it as a tank destroyer. A very, very fast tank destroyer, it'll do 59 kph, and just troll people like crazy by bouncing shots off the front of that hull armour, and then derping back at them with this tier 6 heavy tank gun. I can see people having a lot of fun with that thing. It's certainly got a lot of character. Speaking of tanks with a lot of character, and I'm being generous here, I'm using character in the God that's ugly sense of the word. The tier 8. It looks like somebody stepped on it. The Object 416. Who is going to want to drive that? Yeah. Well, it's like when that thing was born, the doctor slapped its mother. That is horrible. Well, you know, cosmetics aside, is it any good? Well, it doesn't look too bad, actually. Again, it's pretty quick. It'll do 50 kph. Power to weight ratio is alright. It's only a 24-ton tank. Power to weight ratio is 16.67. It's actually not bad at all. So it's quite nippy. It's a very small target. And when I say small target, I really, really do mean it. In fact, we'll put the upgraded turret on it. Imagine how bouncy this is going to be. Look at that. That's going to be bouncing shots like crazy. However, one other thing, and this applies to the A44 as well. Don't expect these things to have very good gun depression. Rear-mounted turrets, large frontal hull, you're just not going to be able to point these guns down. This one in particular, look at that. And I can see this thing having problems. You'd think, oh, this is going to be amazing if you get it hull down. Yeah, good luck getting this thing hull down. For a start, there's just... If you're going to use hull down positions, and you need good gun depression to actually work over the terrain that you hull down behind, and you're just not going to be able to do it in this thing. And the frontal hull armour is not that great either. It's only 75mm thick. The turret is nice. You know, it's a lovely bouncy turret, 110mm thick at the front. Turret's going to bounce shots like crazy, but the hull probably not so much. But it's a very, very small target. If you don't believe me, well, you should believe me, just look at it. But have a look at the ELC. It's not that much bigger than the ELC, and it's smaller than the AMX 1390. So, yeah, I can't see myself getting one of these, but I can see it being an interesting tank to drive. I think we'll just leave it at that. Weapon selection, not too bad actually. It gets the 100mm idiot gun, which is just it's not great. The idiot gun was never fantastic. The D10T, 175mm of penetration. We're at tier 8 now, with a gun that still has 175mm of penetration. Or this 100mm gun here, the M63, which is alright. It's alright, definitely. 201mm of penetration, same rate of fire as the D10T, 320 damage, better than the D10T, 0.37 accuracy, there we go, little bug there, 0.37 accuracy, better than the D10T, same aiming time, and it weighs less, so a clear upgrade in gun. Moving on to tier 10, this tank, the Object 140, the new tier 10 medium, it baffles me. And I don't know why it's in the game. There it is. There's the T62A. The differences between these two tanks are very, very minor. For a start, they both have exactly the same gun. So there's literally no difference whatsoever between the guns. It's exactly the same gun. It has exactly the same rate of fire, damage, penetration, reload, you name it. Exactly the same. And if you look at the two tanks, the T62A has 50 more health. They both weigh pretty much the same. They both have the same horsepower. The 140 has a slightly better power to weight ratio because it weighs slightly less. It's slightly faster, 55 kph versus 50 kph. The traverse speed is pretty much identical. The armour is pretty much, it's actually slightly better armoured, certainly from the sides, but tier 10, the difference between 75 and 80mm of armour is they've both got nothing, so it doesn't matter. They both have the same frontal turret armour. They're both very good hold down tanks. They both have the same rate of fire, slightly worse turret traverse speed on the differences are just minor and practically cosmetic. I don't understand what this tank's for. What does it do better than the T62A that we needed to even put this thing in the game? It's certainly not a bad tank. You know, the T62A is a good tank, but we've already got a T62A. Why do we need to put another one in? Because that's basically what this is. I mean, the armour is 2mm thinner at the front, but better sloping. The turret is, I mean, it's a smaller target. Slightly better power to weight ratio, but to all intents and purposes, it's a T62A. So, yeah, there it is. It's not a bad tank, but it's already in the game. I don't know why we needed to make another one. So, moving on to the new Germans. So there it is, the Panther at tier 6, where it belongs. That is the 3002M. Stock, it looks like this. There you go. It's got that god-awful L48 75mm gun, and it only has one gun upgrade, but luckily that's the 75mm L70, which is a good gun, and is an absolutely fine gun on a tier 6 medium. The stock turret it's a Panther turret. The upgraded turret is a slightly better Panther turret. And that's, you know, I don't mind this. The fact that they've... I mean, look at it. It's a Panther. No. It's the VK3000. Shut up. It's a Panther. Right, it's a Panther at tier 6 where it should have been all along. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's fast. The power to weight ratio is... Come on, where are you? There we go. Not bad, actually. 16.65. It's got Panther armour. It looks like a Panther. It's got a Panther gun. It's a Panther. You can call it what you like. If it looks like a Panther, smells like a Panther, and sounds like a Panther, I'm going to call it a Panther. So there you go, a tier 6 Panther. Great stuff. Next, German heavy tanks. Okay, so here's the first one. The Durchbruchswagen 2. It's a tier 4 heavy tank. No, it isn't. It's a Panzer III. Yeah, it's a heavy tank with 50mm of armour. Well, you know, what can I say? It's only tier 4. I mean, really, who cares? Nobody gets excited about the B1. I can't see anybody getting particularly excited about this thing. It's slow. It's German. It's slow. It's got crap armour. It's got a crap gun. It's a tier 4 heavy. What do you expect? Choice of guns has got the 50mm L60 or the 75mm L24. Which is, I mean, look at that. Oh my, yeah. So, yeah, awful tank. Absolutely awful tank. Boxy, no sloping whatsoever. Going to get penetrated from absolutely every angle. It's a shit tier 4 heavy tank, just like all of the other tier 4 heavy tanks. No surprise there. This thing's hilarious. This is the new German tier 5 heavy tank. The 3001H is now a heavy tank. Oh, really? So they took the 3001H, which was a tier 6 medium, and worked all right as a tier 6 medium. It was the fastest of them, the most manoeuvrable of them. And they basically took everything that made the 3001H good, its speed and manoeuvrability, and threw it away. And they didn't give it any more armour. And they said, now you're a heavy. Oh, and you're a lot slower now because you're a heavy. Oh, yeah, good GG, Wargaming. Well done. Yeah, really, really funny. This thing's a disaster. Tier 5 heavy, really. This is going to go up against KV-1s now, is it, with its 50mm of armour? I don't think so. And it's going to go up against KV-1s very, very slowly as well, because it can only do 35 kph. This thing used to zip around at 50 plus. It was amazing fun to drive, even if it wasn't particularly effective as a tier 6 medium. It was still fun. Well, they've taken all the fun away, and they've just, oh man. It does, however, get a much better gun selection. It's got the L70, which is good. You know, the L70 at tier 5 is a good thing. It's also got the Konish at tier 5. So I'm probably being a bit too harsh on the old 3001H because it didn't really have a role at tier 6, because the Germans had dozens of tier 6 mediums. So this thing being moved down to tier 5 and being called a heavy is, I can sort of see why they've done it. But there's nothing heavy about it. It's just a tier 5 medium with a lot of hit points and a very, very good selection of guns. So the fact that it's got access to the Konish and the L70, in fact you could ignore all of the other guns and just use one of these two. And that is actually probably going to have a nice new lease of life at tier 5 as a heavy tank, even though there's nothing heavy about it. Purely because it's probably got some of the best guns of any of the tier 5 heavies. So, yeah, funny calling this thing a heavy, but it's probably going to be fun. So that moves us on to the 3601H, which is now the German tier 6 heavy tank. And it still gets access to, I mean, there's practically nothing changed. They've given it an extra 50 hit points. And that's it. They said, yeah, you're a heavy tank now. You know, the armour is no different. The gun selection is no different. It's just the 3601H that we all know and love, and now it's a heavy tank. That's it. It's got a different badge. Okay, fair enough. What else is new? Let's have a look. Oh, sorry, they have actually... This makes no sense whatsoever. They've increased the top speed. Oh, you're a heavy tank now. You should go faster. Yeah, it now does 50.5 kph. Theoretical top speed, but the power to weight ratio, well, now it only has a 500 horsepower engine. And this is what I wanted to look at next. It's the changes to all the German engines. So The next thing I wanted to do was to address the changes, and I'm specifically using the word changes, not the buffs, not the nerfs, to the German engines. And it's something that's affected almost every German medium and heavy tank. And what they have done is that they have... Well, I'm going to look at the E75 and the E50 as examples, because they're most illustrative of the changes, the sweeping changes to engines that have affected a lot of the German tanks. There's my E75. E75 used to have a 1200 horsepower engine, as did the E50. Now, it only has a 900 horsepower engine, and it still weighs nearly 100 tons. So, unarguably, unquestionably, that is a nerf. That is a major, substantial nerf to the horsepower per ton ratio, and therefore the mobility of the E75. And this is what has... And it's not just the E75, it's the E75, it's the Tiger 2, it's the Tiger, it's the E50, it's the Panther 2. It's a whole bunch of German tanks that shared these engines. And it's unquestionably a nerf. And that's what got people up in arms about it on the forum, saying, oh, anti-German bias yet again, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah, hold on. That's not all they've done. If you have a look at the tech tree, the E75 in particular, and I think the E50 as well, used to have like 15 different engines that you had to research to get to that 1200 horsepower engine. Not anymore. Now there's only one engine upgrade. So they've simplified the tech tree, and yeah, they've taken the top engine away, but they've given you this 900 horsepower engine instead. So yes, it is still definitely a nerf to the horsepower per ton ratio of the tank, but they've increased the top speed. The top speed is now 40 kph. And yes, you can argue, but with reduced horsepower per ton, you're never going to reach that top speed. Well, yeah, you will. It'll take you a while to get there, but you're now going to exceed that speed going downhill. And you're going to see E75s going down the hills on El Haluf at 50 kph. That's never happened before. So there is a nerf to the mobility of the German tanks, but there's also a buff to the mobility of the German tanks, in that the top speeds in a lot of the cases have been raised, but that's not all. The suspension of these German tanks has been substantially buffed. The E75 now has a traverse speed of 30 degrees. Its previous traverse speed was something in the region of, depending on the suspension you have fitted, 21 to 24 degrees. I mean, that's a major buff. The E50 is the same. If you look at the medium tanks, same, 900 horsepower engine, still weighs 62.6 tons. Still does 60 kph, and whereas the traverse on this was in the low end of the 20 degree range, now it's up to 32. So they have reduced and yet buffed the mobility of the Germans. It's not fair to just call it a nerf. It isn't a nerf. Yes, they've directly nerfed the horsepower per ton ratio, but they've compensated for it in other ways. So there's that. Next, the Super Pershing. It's back in the game. It's there in the tech tree. You can buy it for 7,200 gold. They took it out 2 patches ago in order to rebalance it in light of the changes that occurred in patch 8.6. And it's back in the game. It's refurbished for 8.8. What exactly have they changed? You know, for the life of me, I cannot figure out what they have done to this tank. I mean, there are some very, very minor changes. Everybody was expecting the gun to be buffed and the armour to be nerfed. No, they haven't touched the gun at all. It is exactly the same. It's the same shitty penetration with AP ammo. It's the same good penetration with APCR ammo. It does the same damage, it's got the same accuracy, aiming time. The gun hasn't been touched even slightly. It's exactly the same. The armour is... Well, on paper the armour has been nerfed, believe it or not. It's down to 177 from 178. Yeah, big deal on the hull. And the same deal with the turret. It's down to 101 from 102. Yeah, big deal. But it wasn't about the actual thickness of the armour, because the armour was spaced. And one thing that I can definitely see has changed is this boilerplate that was welded onto the front. This field modification that was done to the Super Pershing. That used to be 2 layers of armour thick, and now it's gone down to 1. So that seems like bad news. I think It's difficult to tell because there's so little actual printed information. They just said Super Pershing rebalanced. Great, how? Could you be any less specific, please? I almost know what you're talking about. It seems that they've increased the sloping. It's difficult to confirm. It's got exactly the same engine, but an increased top speed. It's gone from 38 to 40.2 kilometers per hour. Well, big deal. It never reached 38 in the first place. It's never going to reach the 40.2 either, unless it's going downhill. It hasn't, unless there are some major changes to statistics that don't show up here in the garage. I cannot see what they've done to change this tank. And I certainly hope that's the case, because this thing's been out of the game for 2 patches. And it seems as if they've barely touched it, other than... Oh no, actually, yeah, it's visible from here. It does still have that second... You can just see it there. It does still have that second plate of armour underneath. Only, yeah, there it is. There's the first armour plate, which was welded on, and there's the second one here. But the second one's at a more increased angle, so... Is that a buff to the armour? I don't really know. It's still got exactly the same number of weak spots in exactly the same places, but the gun hasn't changed. So it looks like there's an on paper only mobility increase, and the armour frontally has possibly been slightly buffed due to the increased sloping on the applique armour here at the front. But it's really difficult to say. So I would love to be able to tell you, yeah, the Super Pershing, this has changed, but it's just not possible to give you that information without having lots and lots of games on the test server to let you know if this thing actually plays any differently. But I will be doing that. So watch this space for a detailed look at the changes to the Super Pershing in a future video. Next up at the top here, next to the battle tutorial, you have a missions tab, where you can view your current missions and their progress, as well as view the next missions available. Unfortunately, because it's the test server, there are no actual missions. There are no missions running on the tech server, but at least it's there and it's going to be live. Service record is completely changed. Now, fingers crossed that this doesn't actually crash the game, because it did the first time I tried to load it up. It's a little buggy, it's a little flaky. They're obviously going to make sure it works properly before they make 8.8 go live. So in fact, just to hedge my bets here, I'm going to save this part of the recording and then try again with a fresh recording, because I hate to lose everything that I've already talked about. So here we go, stopping the video now. And in fact, yes, it did crash my game. So the best I was able to do was salvage a couple of screenshots, and I couldn't even show you screenshots from all of the service record tabs. Unfortunately, it's a test server, it's buggy, it's flaky, it doesn't work as intended yet. This is all I can really show you. But you can get a general idea of the new service record interface screen, which is, really nice. But, I'm sure they wouldn't let something as buggy and flaky as this go through onto the live server, Not like people with NVIDIA graphics cards crashing the game every time they try to look at the tech tree, for example. No, that would never happen. Anyway, what's next? Well, for one thing, there are new maps. Well, technically there's only one new map, and this is it, Tundra. There are 3 other new maps in the game, but they're reworkings of old maps, 3 of them, Swamp, Kamarin and Serene Coast. 3 maps that were removed. Oh, and there are the national crew voices, German tank with a German crew, as it should be. Yes, 3 other maps that were removed for being crap. Kamarin, which wasn't just the worst map in World of Tanks, it was the worst map in any game ever. We'll explain why when we look at the new revamped Kamarin coming up after this. Serene Coast, which was just a horrible camp fest. It looked like an open map, but it was actually tiny with only 2 narrow choke points that just got camped on, and nobody could ever move. Horrible, horrible map. And Swamp. Swamp I didn't actually mind, but it was just horribly brown and depressing, and a lot of people didn't like it. I thought it was okay, but that got removed as well. Well, all of them are back now. They've been reworked not just for physics, but also for playability. So we're going to look at those right after this one, the actual new map in the game, Tundra. Tundra is actually not that big a map, although it does feel like a big map. I quite like the feel of it. I'm not really sure how this thing's likely to play out. I thought that Sacred Valley was going to be a really, really good medium tank map, but it turned out to be a massive camp fest. with a couple of strategic points that everybody rushed to occupy and then goes, you know, then just go firm and sit and snipe from. Severagorsk ended up being the mobile map that I thought it was going to be. This one, I really don't know. As you can see up here, you've got this high ground that offers a very, very commanding view of the battlefield, but there isn't a lot of cover up here. Perhaps on the reverse slope of this hill you might find artillery with howitzer guns enjoying a good advantage back down there. And again, there's lots and lots of open ground that is observable from up here, but there's no cover up here, so it kind of cuts both ways. So vehicles with very, very good view range might do well up here. I expect this to be where you're going to see a lot of tank destroyers camping. Anyway, moving on. So, moving around the northern end of the map, there's a lot of open ground here. There is, but it's not exactly a killing zone because it's very up and down. It's not really hilly or mountainous terrain, but there are undulations in the ground that you can use to take advantage. Perhaps going hull down, although you're going to be vulnerable to artillery fire. And this road here, which skirts, it's a railway line basically that cuts diagonally right across the map and connects both of the bases via a bridge right across the middle of the map. The bridge is going to be an utter death trap. But, you know, I'm sure that's not going to stop the ELC drivers trying it. Then you've got this river valley, which is going to be a killing ground for anybody on that high ground that I showed you at the beginning, up in the northwestern corner. And I'm expecting to see lots of slow, unmanoeuvrable heavy tanks dying in there as they get bogged down in the water. But light tanks and mediums might be able to make a go of it. Speaking of area that's suited to light tanks and mediums, you've got this. It's not really a swamp. It's not really scrubland either. But again, lots of water there to slow you down. And not a lot of cover, but for tanks that can get themselves hull down and work their gun depression and good turret armour, they might be able to have a really good fight over here. The only problem being you're completely exposed to artillery. So, and again, it's usually the defining factor of how much, if any, artillery is in a game. If there's no artillery in a game, I can see lights and mediums having a great battle over in this side of the map. If there is artillery in the game and you get caught exposed over here, oh, it's going to be painful. But if you do fight your way through that open ground there, you get round here into the back of this lumberyard, which offers a straight run right into the enemy base. So, yeah, I don't know, provisionally, it's a very pretty map. It's not actually that big. It's only about 800 by 800 meters, but it doesn't feel like a small map. There are several distinct areas of the map that have their own flavour and are going to have their own kind of fight. And I'm looking forward to playing on it. Definitely think this is one of the more interesting maps that they've thrown in. And I do like what they've done with a lot of the recent map design, this one included. Right then, Kamarin. First of the 3 revamped maps. I detested this map with a single-minded intensity that would have made Hannibal Lecter look scatterbrained. This map was so bad. For a start, this central island, you see on the over on the other side of the bridge, you can see some tank traps. Right, these tank traps could only be crossed by heavy tanks. So you can imagine what it was like if you didn't have any heavy tanks on your team. Yeah. It was bloody awful. And nobody really wanted to go onto this middle island in the first place, because this is basically just where heavies went to get killed by artillery. You didn't really have much of an advantage moving up here, because the second you poked out from what little cover was available up here, everybody else could see you. And you just got sniped and shelled and shot, and it was a horrible map. This map ended in one of 2 ways. It was either over in the first 2 minutes as an entire team would just rush for the base, cap in the first 2 minutes, and congratulations, you just won your first win of the day and got 300 XP doubled. Or anybody who tried to do anything brave got sniped by all the tank destroyers or the camping heavies and mediums or the artillery, and it just settled down to the most boring 15-minute long draw. Oh, it was horrible. Also, the bases have been changed. The bases are now where the starting points are, which makes perfect sense, but they were never here. You can see that the starting points are in the northwest and southeast sections of the map. That's where the bases are now as well. I'm just having a go here, trying to see if I can actually get up onto the island from here, and you can't. Anyway, if you look at the map, you see where the red flag and the green flag are. Those are now not just the bases, they're the starting points. Well, they always were the starting points, but that's not where the bases used to be. They're in the northwest and southeast sections of the map. But the bases used to be in the northeast and southwest sections of the map, so diagonally opposite to where they are now. So what it used to be was a mad rush, as half the team would scatter one way to try to cap the enemy flag, and the other team would scatter the other way down the map to try to defend their flag. It never really worked. You can see the direction I'm taking now, which was where the team that started from the red flag would head down to try to defend their cap. And now they've changed this, because this just used to be, all these buildings used to be here. There were a few more buildings as well. There was just all sorts of camping cover up here, and everybody would sit here and watch the flag. Those white bombed out buildings in front of me is where the flag used to be. And to get to that flag, you'll see the bridge the enemy team have to cross. And all of this ground, none of these buildings were here. It was just bare-ass open ground. Back behind me, there would be all sorts of tanks camping and just waiting to destroy anybody who tried to come over this bridge. It was practically impossible to cap unless your entire team rushed the flag. And you could be spotted even crossing this bridge, never mind once you got over it, and there's no cover whatsoever. And of course the enemy would set up all their tank destroyers hull down right here. Now you can imagine, in a match with no artillery, you can imagine how powerful a Jagdtiger would be sitting there. Or a Ferdinand, you know. So, and this map was just horrible. And of course the only ways across were either over the island in the middle or through those choke points on the bridges. Well, they're not the only ways you can get across now. Now I wouldn't recommend doing this in an E7, E5. You need something with a bit of grunt and a bit of speed. But you can ford the rivers. So that's fantastic news. That and the fact that they've changed where the flags are. They've put more cover on the areas where the flags used to be, so you can actually skirmish your way around to the enemy base without getting slaughtered as you cross the bridges. And you don't actually have to cross the bridges. You know, this is fantastic news. So that's Kamarin. Might not actually suck anymore. Moving on to the swamp map. I didn't mind the swamp map that much, but a lot of people hated it. The only real problem I had with the map was that it was so dull and brown and depressing. It made me want to go and listen to a Smiths album. Tactically, the map was pretty limited. It basically consisted of that swampy area in the middle, which was pretty much a death trap. You went in there, you got bogged down, you got fired at from every different direction, and you just died. And around the map there were 2 choke points, and you had to run the gauntlet of the tank destroyers and the camping heavies in order to get through those choke points. Straight ahead there, down the other end of that. You can see where this red E25 has come from. There's a bridge. That was one of the choke points. And you used to get tank destroyers camping on the left over there, and anybody who was brave enough to try that village up ahead would just get slaughtered. Well, you can completely bypass that now by driving along this dried out riverbed. So that's great news. Also, those bridges aren't the choke points that they used to be, because as you can see here, the bridge is actually over there on my right. You can bypass it completely. The rivers are fordable. Once you've managed to defeat or bypass whoever is guarding the bridge, then you've got a clear run into the enemy base here. You've still got the same camping spots here, unfortunately, that were always here immediately as you come out of the enemy base, that usually the KV-1Ss and the KV-2s like to occupy, and prove to be completely useless to the team until everybody else is dead and they're the last ones alive. So no big change there, unfortunately. It doesn't seem to be possible to get onto this high ground where the castle or the chateau is. We did have a good try, but I'm sure some enterprising soul will find a way to get up there, completely break the game, just like they did on Pearl River. From up here you get another view of the central swamp, and it's just a killing ground. There's so many different ways to shoot at anybody trying to navigate their way through there. Next we've got the northern choke point. You cross over what used to be a bridge, has now been destroyed. But it's completely passable. Over here you have a ridge line. Usually you ended up with some light tanks or very fast mediums rushing across the bridge and setting up on this ridge line here just to spot. Well, you can still do that. Commanding view of anybody coming from the enemy base. And you used to get a lot of heavies trying to pass up through that town right up there. And that's a useful spot to go for. And then this used to be a bridge, now it's just wreckage, but it's completely crossable, and you don't even have to cross here. Similar to the other side, there are all sorts of ways across, where you don't even have to use the crossing point. And then carry on further down here, and we're back where we started off, so that's the new refurbished, rebalanced swamp map. Finally we have Serene Coast. And this map was bloody awful as well. It was deceptive. It looked like a nice wide open map with lots of different avenues of attack, when in fact it was the exact opposite. There were two very narrow choke points, both easily covered by multiple tank destroyer positions on each team, and it basically just ended up being a massive boring camp fest. Well, no longer the case. For some reason the Rock of Gibraltar up there seems to be in Canada all of a sudden. This whole part of the map just wasn't here. This entire spur of land just wasn't here. This was a completely open bay, totally dominated by tank destroyers and artillery, parked up ahead there on that island. Well, now you can assault round from this side of the map. It just opens up tactical options that weren't there the first time this map was in the game. Moving around into the enemy base, traditionally, all that ground ahead, once you got over the railway line, you started climbing up into the hills on the western side of the map. Those hills just aren't there anymore. Pretty much from this point on, caught a bit of air there, you were going uphill. And again, right here, there are buildings here now. They weren't here before. This used to be rocky outcrops where tank destroyers would just sit and camp the entire game without moving and just farm kills on anybody who tried to push across the middle, while also having commanding fire at anybody who tried to come around from the north. You would tend to get a couple of mediums, maybe a couple of heavies who would come up here, and this was all very high ground. And they would just sit on that corner and not dare to move. Well, now, I don't know, it's just there are just so much more options. It's not completely flat. There is still cover here, or concealment. And that hill up ahead was a lot more steep than it is now. And there were bushes at the top, and you would just have enemy tanks camping in the bushes, waiting to annihilate anybody who tried to push across this side. So there's some very, very welcome changes on this map. Potential artillery camping spot down there. It's not all that's changed as well. We're almost back. We've almost done a full circle heading back towards our base. So let's have a look at what they've changed in the railway line. Again, this is another one of those maps like Prokhorovka, with a railway line dominating the centre of the map. I wouldn't recommend actually trying to use the railway line in the heat of battle, however. There is no cover whatsoever up there. And it's definitely a small tank only kind of deal. Down under here, fighting through here is going to be a lot more viable due to the fact that over on the right, up there, trying to get through here, we just got slaughtered by tank destroyers and camping heavies. in the hills up in front. But there are no hills there anymore. There aren't as many positions where you can sit there without being spotted and just pour fire into anybody trying to come across this part of the map. So overall, yeah, I'm pretty impressed with the changes that they've made to all three of the old maps. Judgment still reserved on the new map, Tundra. Until I actually play a few games on it, I really have no idea how it's going to work out. But I'll try to bring you some footage of that in the days and possibly weeks ahead, depending on how long the test server's up. So there you go. Well, I was going to say relatively quick by my standards. A relatively quick overview of what patch 8.8 holds for you, the paying, or as the case may be, not paying public. Coming up, I'm going to be trying to drive as many of these tanks as I possibly can on the test server, just so you get an idea of how they perform in battle and whether or not you should be investing your time, money and or experience into grinding these things out for yourself. I'm quite pleased with the way patch 8.8 has rolled out, because there's so many different tanks all the way across the tech tree. It's not like everybody is just playing the tier 10s. Because you've got tanks down here at tier 4, there's some of the new German heavies, there's the tier 5 new tanks, there's tier 6, there's new tanks all the way across the board. So I may actually be able to play games in just about everything, whereas in the previous test servers, if you weren't playing at tier 8, 9 or 10, you just sat in the queue for 5 minutes and you couldn't get a game. So fingers crossed, I'll actually be able to show you some varied gameplay in all of the new tanks that are being introduced. I certainly hope that's going to be the case. As always, folks, take care on that battlefield. I will catch you next time.